When I survey the wondrous throng, on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I
go to the Philippines. He said, if you go to the Philippines, this was back in the early 50s, and things were different at that time in the world. And so we had to decide not to go to the Philippines under Far East Broadcasting Company. Instead of that, I ended up working at KJLT in North Platte. And I went to work there in January of 1957, 59, I guess it was. And 4 months later, I ended up being the manager of the station. Boy, I did. I had to learn some things real fast. At the same time, I had the privilege of serving in a church there in North Platte at the Berean Church as minister of music and youth minister. In fact, as I look out into the congregation, I see somebody that was in my youth group at that time. We had the privilege of directing many of our kids to Bible colleges and Bible institutes. A number of them came to grace. I would come each year with a busload of young people to the youth conference and to help them see the importance of being a part of Christian education. I served there at KJLT for 7 years, and then I got a call from Dr. Harder wanting to know if I would come in and start a new FM station in Omaha. And I said no, I wasn't interested. We had just built a new home in North Platte, and everything was going so great. God was blessing the ministry of the radio station, and I felt I just didn't want to come to Omaha. Well, he asked me 3 different times, and after the 3rd time that he asked me, I turned to Avani and I said, you know, maybe we ought to pray about this. Because I hadn't even wanted to pray about it. And I said, you know, they've asked me 3 times, I've turned them down 3 times. If they call me again, I believe maybe that might be an indication from the Lord. So let's not talk to anybody about it, but just pray. So we did. And a week or 2 later, I got another phone call from Dr. Harder. He said, Ward, every time we meet, your name comes up. Are you sure this isn't where the Lord wants you? And I said, well, maybe it is. I had the privilege of coming to Omaha and starting KGBI and served as their manager for 20 years and saw God do just amazing things through the radio station. My experience with FM radio was absolutely zero. I knew nothing about FM because we were an AM station in North Platte. FM was new at that time, and a lot of people didn't know much about it. They had placed a 160-foot tower right in front of Old Main. And we started that station at 35,000 watts. And you could hear it in the organ in the chapel. You could hear it in the organ in the Methodist church next door. The girls in the dormitory could hear it in their teeth. And that was not really what should have been done. We had that for a number of years, and then we built a 500-foot tower out south on one of our alumni's fields out there in the middle of a field of corn. And later on, the school sold the station. We put the station on for $25,000. And they sold it for $11 million. And they sold it at the right time because they hit just the time when the peak was in demand for FM stations. I praise the Lord for the experiences I've had at Grace Bible Institute, Grace College of the Bible, and now Grace University. It's been a tremendous blessing in my life to see God take just a plain old country boy and use him over and over again in the reaching. I could share many, many testimonies of people who have accepted Christ in listening to Christian radio. Lives have been changed. Families have been changed through the ministry of Christian radio. And God was good enough to me to allow me to be a part of that. For 46 years, I had the opportunity of being in Christian radio work. Today, we still live in Hagerstown, Maryland. I have the privilege of serving on a number of boards and being active in my local church, and then I still go out and help at the radio station when it comes to share-a-thon time to raise the funds to operate nonprofit Christian radio. What a blessing. Thank you so much.
That was awesome. Mr. Childerston, I also had my share of 7:30 classes where my eyes were kind of heavy, and I just actually dozed off. Well, thank you for sharing. Representing the 60s will be Miss Lois Pankratz.
Visual aids. 57 years ago, I arrived at Grace Bible Institute as an excited 18-year-old who wanted to learn to know God better. I lived on the 3rd floor of Old Main. Remember, girls, how we would listen carefully for when the phone rang at the end of the hall, because mine was 4 longs, and when it was 4 long rings, then we ran to get the phone. Every room had a different ring. Or how we would run to the mailboxes. This is what they looked like. Do you remember that? In Old Main? To see if we had a letter from home, or maybe a note from some special person who knew our combination. Or how we would race down the stairs after our last morning class to scarf down lunch so we could hurry to work for the afternoon. And by the way, I have a mark in my Bible, not from my ink pen, but from tripping on that top step with all my books flying to the bottom. I just had to jump, and I landed on my Bible. And so it got torn. The chorale trips were priceless. The classes were helpful, and I'll never forget the class with Dr. Rieger, where we got to paint our flannel graph backgrounds. Do you remember that? The flannel backgrounds? Incidentally, I have one that my father painted in the late 40s. But to be honest with you, I have used those backgrounds hundreds of times. I'm thankful for that class. Yes, my 3 years at Grace changed my life because it also brought me my husband, Harvey Pankratz. We were married 1 week after graduation, and what followed has been a long obedience in the same direction. It has included serving in Sweden as missionaries, farming in northern Minnesota, and working at the U.S. headquarters of Greater Europe Mission in Colorado. My journey has included much joy especially in welcoming 4 children and 11 grandchildren into the world. But it has also included sorrow when we buried our daughter in Sweden and my husband transitioned to his eternal home 7 years ago. But you know what, as I think back to my time at Grace, has been the most helpful class that we took. Can anybody tell me what it was? What are you saying? Scripture memory. In those days, we had to learn 300 verses in order to graduate. And God has used those verses all through my years. It has given the Holy Spirit something to bring to my mind, to my heart, whenever I needed it. When I get tired, I am reminded that as thy days, so shall thy strength be. Or, if I wait on the Lord, my strength will be renewed. I will mount up with wings like eagles, run and not be weary, walk and not faint. Isaiah 40:31. When I get discouraged about results in my ministry, I am reminded that God's word will accomplish what he pleases and will prosper wherever he sends it. Isaiah 55:11. When things don't make sense, he gently reminds me that his ways are not my ways. His thoughts are higher than my thoughts. And, well, after all, he is the potter and I am the clay. Romans 9:22. He tells me not to worry about anything, but rather to pray about everything in Philippians 4:8. He reminds me that without him, I can do nothing. Nada. When I don't know what to do, he promises that if I lack wisdom, I can ask God and he will give it to me. James 1:5. Yet, he encourages us in Ephesians 2:1, and this is the New Living Translation, that we are his masterpiece, created anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. When I become anxious, Jesus comforts me with his words, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." John 14:27. In 1 Corinthians 15:58, we are challenged to be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Why? Because our labor is not in vain in the Lord. Lamentations 3:22 and 23 reminds us of the Lord's mercies, his compassions that never fail. They are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. So as I continue my journey of obedience, I cry out with Paul, and he said in 2 different places in Philippians, I will trust God to work in me to both desire and to do his good pleasure. Philippians 2:13. And I'm so thankful that we can trust him to give us the desires for the things he wants us to do. And then to know that his strength will not fail. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then I cry out with Paul, for me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. May we all continue to live our lives as we were encouraged to do while studying here at Grace, to live our lives to the praise of his glory. Thank you.
All right. Is everybody having a good time? I gotta check the postal room. Everybody having a good time? Yeah. Well, we're gonna skip over the 70s part because we don't have a 70s alumni representation. And even though I was born in the 70s, you might not want me to sing a song during the 70s part, do you? No, I know you wouldn't. Well, anyways, as we skip over the 70s, we are into the 80s. So can I have a Mrs. Janet Wismer up from the 80s?
Dear Grace, you and I go back a long ways. In fact, I can't remember a time I didn't know about you. I've known about you my whole life. But I think I became really acquainted with you for the first time sitting back in the southwest quadrant of Sucal Memorial Chapel when my family came to hear the Messiah being performed because my brother was up here on the stage. And quite frankly, I found it boring because I was, after all, about 9. Not because the music wasn't wonderful, it was probably beautiful. But as my brother and I were sitting there, my younger brother and I, and watching, we noticed one of the soloists batted her eyes when she sang. Well, that got our attention. So we began batting our eyes at each other, to our parents' chagrin. But I'm so grateful, Grace, because you gave me 2 wonderful teachers in my youth. Levi Croker, who graduated in 1963, and Phil Baer, who graduated in 1972. They left a lasting impression on my life. Well, 8 years after that Messiah incident, I found myself on this same platform, singing in a choir, acting in a skit, playing the handbells, singing in a trio, narrating for a Christmas concert, all sorts of things like that. And I just want to thank the Lord for allowing you, Grace, for bringing a troop of wonderful, dedicated, read that, overworked and underpaid, professors and staff members into my life who truly changed me forever. I think of Kathy Walter. I don't know of anyone who has served a place longer and more cheerfully than Kathy. I don't see her often. I don't see her often, but every time I do, I am totally encouraged and cheered by her disposition. Then there was Warren Edgar. He taught me how to use a razor blade and an edit block and a grease pencil so that I might make effective radio programs. And the Lord certainly used that skill as He allowed me to serve Him at Back to the Bible and HCJB Radio in Quito, Ecuador. And then there was Mr. Flickinger. Mr. Flickinger shaped my thinking and my acting when it came to worship, and I still carry his definition of worship with me today. The occupation of the soul, not with its needs, nor even with its blessings, but with God Himself. And because worship is life, and life is worship, that definition has served me well as I have reared children, kept a home, done all the things that you've done too, cared for aging parents. That definition has served me well. And then there was Mr. Johnson. His unassuming way, he presented such well-prepared lectures for English and piqued in me a desire to know the English language better and the history of that English language. And he had no idea that this student sitting in his class would spend 30 years of her life writing articles and teaching homeschooled kids how to speak and write and coaching speech and debate clubs, and she didn't know either. But God used you, Grace, to have him train me for the calling you had for my life. Who can forget Daniel Goldberg? Daniel Goldberg taught Old Testament survey. And every now and then, he would stand up on the table, yes, on the table, in the room, put his hands on his hips and say, "This is a survey class, and I am taking a survey." How many of you brought your 1901 American Standard Bible to Old Testament today? And if you couldn't hold yours up, you got to go back to your room and get it and miss out on part of the lecture. Then there was Abe Penner. Abe Penner taught me how to learn things, how to learn hundreds of things by developing pneumatic devices. And he had such a way of teaching new material to people. And I carry that enthusiasm with me today when I teach people. And speaking of teaching, there was that Russell Jones. He taught us how to outline a passage. Oh no, not just a passage, an entire book of the Bible, Hebrews to be exact. And I still hone that skill today when I am preparing to teach either a Sunday school class or a women's Bible study, and I will ever be grateful. And by the way, Grace, there's one little anecdote about Abe Penner that you might not remember. He was walking across campus one day, across Worthington, and I was up in the house that we called Worthington, where I lived, which no longer exists. And Janelle Fry and I, and it could have been Tricia Passer or Beth Hall, I don't really remember, but there were three of us, and we watched Abe Penner come towards us across the street from the Cheddar Academic Building, and just as he got to where we were, we called down and we said together in unison, "Hi, Abe." He shook his finger at us and said, "You rascals, you ought to be studying." And in a perfect, unrehearsed unison, we said, "We are." Well, finally, Grace, I want to thank you for providing a platform where Bible teachers and special speakers, missionaries could come and challenge my thinking about God and myself and the world around me, and help answer that question, why do I really obey God's word? Is it because I'm afraid of punishment? Or is it because I truly love that one who has sought a relationship with me through the reconciliatory work of his Son, Jesus Christ, on a cross? That's a question I have to answer every day, every moment of every day. Well, Grace, it's time to say goodbye to this brick and mortar. And I don't know what's going to happen to it. This place where we rushed and hurried and pulled all-nighters and hurt one another and then experienced that sweet relationship of saying I'm sorry and being reconnected. That place where we fell asleep in class, and that place where we took tests. That place where we many times rededicated our lives to live for you. May that place, regardless of who inhabits it after us, in some way that only you can orchestrate, may this place continue to understand and somehow feel your presence as the years pass. Gratefully, Janet Anderson Wismer, apostrophe 80.
Wonderful. Representing the 90s, Liz Lambert.
I'm actually part of the 2000s era, not 90s, but that's okay. It is so great to see so many familiar faces with you, and it's been a very long time since I've been up in front of people during chapel, so forgive me if I just ramble, but I will be very quick. But I just have a couple of things I want to say. So I'm originally from Omaha, and so when it came time for me to pick a college, Grace was absolutely last on my list. I did not want to come here. I wanted to go far away and kind of explore the world and go somewhere out of my comfort zone. So when I was I toured lots of different colleges, and they just weren't working out. And so when Grace gave me a scholarship, or one of the best ones, I reluctantly came here. And so I decided that if I was going to go to a college I wasn't wanting to go to, that I must make the most of it. So I became super involved, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my adult life. I'm so grateful that I listened to the Lord's word for me and that I decided to come here. I was a part of lots of things here. I was on SBA, and I made so many great friends through that. Many of them are here. Choir was a super big part of my life too. I loved singing under Dr. Zilke, and just having, we went through so many different churches and sang for so many different people that just really ministered to me. We were able to travel with the choir to several states. We even went to China and Australia, and it was just such a great experience. Those experiences have just been ones that I will treasure forever. And I had the sheer privilege of going through the teacher education program here, and I can say without hesitation that I received an education that was second to none. Because I was not only challenged in my field, which Dr. Lundgren and Dr. Alford and many others were the best people to challenge me in that field, but I also had my faith challenged. I had my way of thinking challenged. I was around people who were constantly having really rich discussions and challenging me to be better, and for that I am forever grateful. I'm so thankful to the Lord that I listened to Him and I came here. I met my husband here, although I was not anticipating I was going to meet my husband at Grace, but that worked out great. And we just talk all the time about how great it is that we were given so many opportunities to serve, to learn here, and we'll just be forever grateful. And as a teacher now myself, I don't think I ever quite realized just how dedicated and faithful these professors that we all had truly were. I'm in the field now, and I understand just how much time and effort it takes just to teach, but they were also discipling us. And so we're the luckiest, weren't we? This has been so great, and I think our legacy will carry on, and I will be forever grateful. Thank you.
All righty, now we're walking into the 2000s. Yes, the 2000s. And representing the 2000s will be Mr. Luke Isaacson.
Oh man, this feels like old times. How are we doing? Good. Good. Hey, where's the 2000s representatives? I just want to say. Oh, it is good to see you guys. Well, my name is Luke. I graduated in 2012, and Grace has had an immense impact on my life. And I think just in thinking about my time here, it's actually pretty unique. So I came as a freshman in 2007. And I didn't necessarily do any research about Grace prior to that. My mom had said, hey, Luke, I will pay for your freshman year of school, but I get to pick it. So I was like, that doesn't sound too bad. Well, there's one thing. I wasn't walking with the Lord in any remote sense of the word. I had grown up in a Christian home, and she was like, yeah, I'm going to send you to Grace University. It's in my hometown. It's a Christian school, and they have a basketball team. And so I was like, sure, that sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I'll go to it. Again, not having researched anything. So I come to Grace. And I remember the first day being like, okay, cool. Then the second day I started seeing everybody that I had already seen, and I was like, wait a minute, is this the whole school? Is it really this small? And not only that, I was not used to hanging out with Christians, and to me it was like, oh my gosh, these are the weirdest people on the planet. And I was pretty judgmental at the time, so I was like, this is not gonna work out. So I wanted to play basketball right. I ended up making the team, but basically the third open gym, pulled my groin, ended up tearing it and then getting surgery. So that was just a bad situation as well. And basically what I can say about my freshman year is I hated Grace University. I hated the school. I wanted out, and I wanted nothing to do with it. However, during that year, I think something happened in me, sitting in chapels most of the time, just sleeping, dozing off. I remember this Old Testament survey, just like, oh my gosh, this is a drag. Even though Dr. Holmes is an OG. Dr. Holmes, are you in here? Yeah. There we go. I want to retake that class. I'm serious. Maybe next year. Sorry. We're family, right? Family. So yeah, there was a seed planted in my heart though, and I was like, okay, I need to figure out what I really believe about all this stuff. There are some people who love Jesus. My family loves Jesus. I need to figure this out. And so a friend of mine had the great advice of saying, Luke, you know what you need to do? You need to get as far away as possible. You need to just get away from all the influences and decide what you truly believe about Jesus, about faith, about Christianity. So I said, okay, that sounds great. So I went to Australia, which I figured if it's horrible, like my current experience, then at least I'm in Australia, right? Like that couldn't be too bad. So while I was there, I went with a program called Youth with the Mission, and God just radically got a hold of my heart. And just changed me and gave me just this hunger for his word. And then he did the one thing I never wanted or expected or thought he would do. He called me back to Grace University. Back to the place I never wanted to come. But it was the thing I needed the most. I can say that Grace provided the perfect platform to me to grow as a disciple. I was never looking for leadership at all. I didn't even see myself as a leader, but different faculty and even students were like, hey, Luke, you should consider running for student body president. I was like, what? Like, hey, it will pay for your school or part of it. So I was like, okay, I'm in, right? But really, it just provided a place for me to learn and grow and fail and develop as a leader. And not only that, it was just different people being able to speak into that as well. And I think even in the classes, it was different because what they were teaching was rich and deep, and so on an academic level, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And not only that, just the community, being able to rub shoulders with other guys and girls who are just going for it and wanting to see Jesus as Lord and move in their generation. I think that, coupled with just the situation in the school, helped me to become the man I am today. And so now, as a pastor, Grace University has had a profound impact in my life. And I was just thinking about it. Our mission statement is, Grace University exists to develop servant leaders for the home, the church, and the world. And I think that is truly, if I'm taking anything away from Grace, it's just this, it's that. Like I now can say, I think I know what it means to be a servant leader in my home, in the church, in the world. And I know how to think through things with a biblical worldview. And as it's been said, we know Grace is closing down and the brick and mortar is going to be no longer. But the beautiful thing about God's kingdom is that will continue. And I think the legacy of Grace will continue as we all continue to live out that mission statement. And so for that, I'm grateful. And for Grace, I'm grateful. Thank you.
Now we're going into our teens. Luke, you're a slighter teen, you're right at 12, we'll keep you there. All right, so let's go into our teens. And so give me Claire Dupree. Claire. And after Claire will be followed up with a prayer from Travis.
Hi. Well, I find it interesting that the person representing the oldest group here was the youngest in his class, and I am the youngest in my class, so I thought that was interesting. So you guys know the Facebook time hop when you're looking back each year what you posted on that day? I'm starting to see a lot of me, high school senior me, posting where am I going to college, trying to figure this out. Oh, there's Grace University. Oh, but there's also this other college. And I will never, ever regret choosing Grace University. I grew in my faith so much more than I ever expected, with the professors discipling me, my friends discipling me and coming alongside me, and there really are no words to describe. no words to describe what this school has done for me. It really is a family, and in particular, two of the professors, Dr. Zilke and Mr. James, were like fathers to me. And fellow students like brothers and sisters. And I really thank God for giving me the opportunity to come here. Again, I will never regret choosing this place. And really, it's God who chose for me to come be here. I got to see the Bible in a whole new light. I knew the story of the Bible, but it was knowledge, not really knowing. And seeing it presented in like Dr. Holmes and Dr. Linder's classes just opened my eyes to God's plan for humanity. From the beginning, from the fall, all his work through the Old Testament. And yeah, it can seem dry at first, but when you really look into it, it's incredible. And then getting to Jesus' death and his resurrection, seeing that the whole thing pan out, and the way the professors presented that, you could tell that they lived it, believing it in their heart, not just knowing it. And I really thank God for giving me this opportunity to be here. And seeing all these different faces it's incredible how many generations God used Grace University to impact. I think that's all I can do. Thank you.
All right, I know Travis is supposed to come up here and do the closing prayer, but Miss Kathy Walter, she was like a second mom to me at Grace. So, you know, like when your mom asks you to do something, you have to do it. Don't give any attitude. So she just came over here and asked me to share about Coach Clausen and what he meant to me. And honor. Jim Clausen saved my life. Jim Clausen impacted my life. Jim Clausen is the most inspirational person in my life. It was spring of 1995. I had gotten kicked out of a junior college in Sheridan, Wyoming. And I didn't know Christ at the time, even though I had attended the church, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I remember as my basketball coach at the time at Sheridan Junior College took away my scholarship, told me that I was a disgrace, told me that I would never amount to anything, and that he wished he wouldn't have wasted money on getting me from Texas to Wyoming to play basketball. And I remember going back to my dorm room crying because someone told me that my life was worthless and that I didn't have any value. And to make the fast forward really quickly, my English professor at the time at this community college, Carol Garcia, said, "Charles," she saw me crying as I was walking back to my dorm room, and she said, "Come with me. Here it is, this little tiny white lady holding hands with a big tall black man walking across campus." As he's crying, you know. And so we go into her office, and she has all these Bible quotes all over her office and everything. And I was like, there's something different about this office. And there was a 500-page Christian college catalog. And on page 498 was Grace College of the Bible, Omaha, Nebraska. I was like, oh man, Omaha, Nebraska, what do you do? So anyways, being a Texas guy, we had called Grace College of the Bible. We had called Terry Thomas, which is Terry Dinkfield now. She was the admissions counselor at the time, and Coach Jim Clausen. And Miss Garcia, she got on the phone with Coach Clausen, and she said, "I have a young inner city kid here from the state of Texas who just got himself into a lot of trouble, but he needs to go to a Christian school to get his life straight." And so I'm thinking, yeah, Christian school, play basketball and get out? Yeah, I can do that. And so anyways, 2 days later, I get some stuff in the mail, an application in the mail to go to Grace University. To come to Grace College of the Bible. It changed to the university the year I ended up arriving here. And so I had many talks with Coach Clausen over the phone throughout that summer of 1995. And I got accepted into Grace, and I actually lied on my application. And what I mean by that is, I thought being a Christian is that you had to believe in God and be a good person. And I thought I was a good person, a fairly nice person. I only got into a fight at junior college, and I believed in God. But I didn't know what it was like to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. So I kind of, not really filled out everything, but I think, God qualified me to get accepted into Grace University. So it was August 19th, 1995, on a Saturday. I'll never forget this. I had on a white, dirty Guess shirt from the night before that I had the night before, and some Guess shorts with $3 in my pocket. And I was like the oldest looking 19-year-old guy that you can ever come across. And I see Coach Jim Clausen at the airport, meet him for the first time. He has this Grace Royals basketball shirt on, shorts pulled up to here. And I said, "You must be Coach Clausen." He said, "You must be Charles." And so I went to shake his hand, and he reached and hugged me. I take my one suitcase, I put it in his minivan. We went from Epley Airfield to Grace University, to this campus. And he said, "Young man," when he dropped me off at Harder Hall in front of the door, "make this the best 4 years of your life." He didn't walk me up to my room or anything. He just dropped me off right there. And so being here on campus a month and 4 days after he dropped me off, I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And 2 days prior to me accepting Christ, I was so intimidated by everyone's Bible knowledge that I just one day walked to Coach Clausen's office, and as he was sitting at his desk, I kind of leaned over his desk and said, "Clausen, I want out. I want to go home. I'm ready to leave." And he looks at me, and if you know Coach, you know his voice. "Well, Charles, a guy like yourself really need to think about stuff like that. How about you just go back to your dorm, unpack your suitcase, and let's deal with this." And I was like, and guess what? I walk out of his office crying, going back to my dorm room, unpacking my suitcase, and staying here. And so I just thank God so much for him and what he has meant to me and what he's done for me over the years while I was here at Grace. And I'll never forget my last basketball game for Grace University. We were in a tournament in Oklahoma. And we had played Dallas Christian, and after the game, I was the only senior on the team that year. And after the game, the team presented me with a game ball. And all I can do was look at this man and run up to him and hug him, embrace him, and I cried like a baby. Because to me, he was more than my coach. To me, he was more than a counselor. To me, he was more than a friend. He was like a father figure that I wanted to break my neck for every single night I stepped on the floor. And even if I had a bad game or a good game, he was there to embrace me and love me. And I wouldn't be the man that I am today if it wasn't for Jim Clausen playing that role in my life. And for my professional work, I serve as an administrator at a Christian alternative high school called the Omaha Street School. I've had the pleasure of being there for 15 years. And again, Coach Clausen is the reason why I do what I do today. And I also came back to this beautiful place to help coach men's basketball here. And I want to bring back this, even if I know we're only here for the next 7 or 8 months, but I want to bring back everything that Coach Clausen instilled in me into this young team today. And again, I just thank God for Jim Clausen and the life that he not only played in my life, but many others as well. So thank you for letting me share.
Well, Well, I have absolutely loved hearing everybody's stories through the decades. I've been struck with how, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Hearing how through the decades things have changed, but I've seen one common thing decade through decade that has stayed the same at Grace University, and that is Old Testament is still hard to stay awake in. It is. No. Year after year, decade after decade, God has used Grace to form leaders for the home, the church, and the world, and that has just been encouraging for me to see how that has all worked out.